What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Hello, brave souls. Today's story is about a service member not trying to be an awful person and trying to defend a community at the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. So here we have The Last Stand. Act 1. The Awakening. The first screams came at 0347 hours. Sergeant Marcus Chen bolted upright in his bunk at Fort Bragg, muscle memory kicking in before his mind fully processed the chaos erupting outside. 22 years of service had taught him to distinguish between routine disturbances and genuine emergencies. This was neither. This was something else entirely. The base's emergency sirens wailed as Marcus grabbed his gear, fingers moving with practiced efficiency in the darkness. Through his barracks window, he could see figures stumbling across the parade ground in the pre-dawn gloom. Something was wrong with their movements. Too jerky, too aggressive, too wrong. "Chen!" Corporal Davies burst through the door, his usually composed face twisted with panic. "You need to see this, Sarge. The whole perimeter's been breached. But there aren't any insurgents or..." He paused, swallowing hard. "They're not alive." Marcus followed Davies outside, his M4 carbine ready. The scene that greeted him violated every law of nature he understood. Soldiers he'd served with for years were attacking their own comrades with teeth and nails, their eyes vacant, skin mottled gray. The wounded didn't stay down. They got back up, joining the attackers. "Fall back to the armory," Marcus shouted over the chaos, his training taking over even as his mind reeled. He grabbed Davies and two other soldiers, Private Kim and Specialist Rodriguez, and fought their way through the nightmare landscape that had been their home. The armory was a fortress of concrete and steel, but even as they barricaded themselves inside, Marcus could hear the infected. He refused to think the Z word, clawing at the walls. The base's communication systems were down, but the emergency broadcast painted a picture of global catastrophe. New York, LA, London, Tokyo, all dark. "What's the play, Sarge?" Rodriguez asked, checking his ammo. At 19, he was the youngest of their group, looking to Marcus for answers he didn't have. Marcus studied the base schematics, spread across the armory table. "We gather intel, collect supplies, and extract any survivors we can find. There's a civilian shelter 3 miles south, Millbrook Elementary. If anyone's alive in this sector, that's where they'd go." The plan was simple in theory. Use the armory's weapons and supplies to cut through the infected base, reach the motor pool, and drive to the civilian population center. In practice, it meant fighting through hundreds of turned soldiers who knew the base layout as well as they did. They moved at dawn, when the infected seemed less active. The base Marcus had called home was now a necropolis. Bodies littered the streets. Some still, others beginning to twitch back to unholy life. They reached the motor pool after 2 harrowing encounters, during which Marcus learned that headshots were the only reliable way to stop the infected permanently. The drive to Millbrook took them through suburban neighborhoods that looked like war zones. Abandoned cars blocked intersections, houses stood with doors hanging open, and infected wandered the streets in growing numbers. But the elementary school still flew an American flag, and smoke rose from its chimney. Marcus parked the Humvee behind the school and approached cautiously. A voice called out from behind the building. "That's far enough, soldier." "Sergeant Marcus Chen, U.S. Army," he called back. "We're here to help." A grizzled man emerged from behind a dumpster, hunting rifle trained at Marcus. "Name's Bill Harrison. I'm the principal here. Or was. Before this whole thing went to hell. You alone?" "3 others in my unit. How many survivors you got?" Bill's weathered face creased with relief. 43. Mostly kids and a few teachers. We've been holding out for 3 days, but food's running low, and those things are getting bolder." Marcus assessed the school's defenses as Bill led them inside. The building was well fortified, windows barricaded, choke points established, clear fields of fire. But it was also a trap. One breach, and everyone inside would be cornered. The survivors were a cross-section of small-town America, children ranging from 6 to 12, several teachers, a few parents who'd made it to the school when the outbreak began, and Bill himself. They looked at Marcus with desperate hope. "What's the situation out there, Sergeant?" asked Mrs. Patterson, a second-grade teacher who'd somehow managed to keep her class together through the apocalypse. Marcus chose his words carefully. "The infection is widespread. Military command structures broken down. We're on our own." He paused, meeting each adult's eyes. "But we're not giving up. We're going to get you somewhere safe." Act 2. The Crucible. The infected found them on the fourth night. Marcus was on watch when he heard the telltale scraping and moaning that had become the soundtrack of this new world. Through the school's reinforced windows, he could see them. Dozens of figures shambling across the playground, drawn by some invisible signal. "Contact!" he whispered into the radio, waking his team. "Multiple infected approaching from the east. This is not a drill." The school's PA system crackled to life as Bill broadcast the rehearsed evacuation protocol. Children who should have been learning multiplication tables instead grabbed their assigned emergency bags and moved to predetermined positions with military precision. The first infected reached the school's main entrance at 0230 hours. The reinforced doors held, but Marcus could hear more arriving by the minute. Through the security monitors, they had managed to keep running. He watched the playground fill with bodies. "How many?" Davies asked, checking his rifle's magazine. "Too many," Marcus replied grimly. 60, maybe 70, and more coming. The infected weren't mindless. Marcus had learned that over the past few days. They communicated somehow, coordinated their attacks. When one found prey, others followed. The school had become a beacon in the darkness, drawing every infected for miles. The eastern barricade failed first. A classroom window that had been weakened by repeated impacts finally shattered, allowing 3 infected to pour through. Mrs. Patterson screamed as rotting hands grabbed for 6-year-old Tommy Mitchell. Marcus moved without thinking, his rifle barking 3 times in rapid succession. The infected dropped, but the sound attracted more. The careful silence they'd maintained was broken. "Rodriguez, Kim, reinforce the east wall," Marcus shouted. "Davies, get the kids to the gym. Bill, you're with me." The next hour was a nightmare of gunfire, screaming and desperate improvisation. They fell back room by room, using the school's layout to funnel the infected into killing zones. But for every one they dropped, 2 more seemed to take its place. "We can't hold!" Davies called out as the infected poured through a breach in the north wall. "There's too many!" Marcus made a decision that would haunt him forever. The school had a natural gas line running to the cafeteria. If they could create an explosion. "Everyone to the gym!" he ordered. "Now! Davies, help me with this!" While the others evacuated, Marcus and Davies rigged an improvised explosive, using the gas line and emergency flares. They had maybe 3 minutes before the building would be overrun. The explosion lit up the sky, taking out a significant portion of the infected horde and buying them precious time. But the school was burning. Their sanctuary was destroyed. 43 survivors huddled in the parking lot as their refuge burned behind them. They had limited supplies, no shelter, and infected were already being drawn to the flames from across the town. "What now, Sergeant?" Bill asked, quietly, holding a sobbing 7-year-old. Marcus looked at the faces around him, scared, exhausted, but still alive. His military training warred with the reality of their situation. By the book, he should find a defensible position and wait for extraction that might never come. But these weren't soldiers. They were innocents who'd placed their trust in him. "We move north," he decided. "There's a ranger station in the state forest, about 15 miles. Isolated, defensible, with its own water supply. We travel at night and we stay off the main roads." The journey began immediately. Marcus organized them into a column. Davies and Rodriguez as scouts, Kim bringing up the rear, with the civilians protected in the middle. They moved through the backyards and side streets, avoiding the main arteries where infected congregated. By dawn, they'd covered 8 miles. The group was exhausted, and several of the younger children could barely walk. They took shelter in an abandoned farmhouse, posting guards while the others rested. It was there that Marcus learned the full scope of their situation. Kim had managed to get a working radio, and the news was devastating. Major cities were completely overrun. The military was in full retreat. The president was missing, presumed dead. Isolated pockets of survivors were scattered across the country, but organized resistances had collapsed. So what's the point? Rodriguez asked bitterly. We're just prolonging the inevitable. Marcus understood the youngest soldier's despair. But he'd made a choice back at that school. These people, these children, represented something worth preserving. Maybe they couldn't save the world, but they could save this small piece of it. The point, Marcus said firmly, is that we're still human. We still choose how we face the end. And I choose to fight. Act 3. The Last Stand. The ranger station was perfect. It was too perfect. Perched on a wooded hill with clear sight lines in all directions, supplied with solar power and a natural spring. It should have been empty. Instead, Marcus could see movements through the windows and smoke from the chimney. Could be survivors, Davy suggested, hopefully. Marcus studied the building through binoculars. Could be, or it could be a trap. He'd heard reports of survivors turning on each other, desperate people doing desperate things. They'd approached carefully, leaving the main group hidden in the tree line. The station's occupants saw them coming. Marcus counted at least 6 figures watching from windows. That's close enough, a voice called out when they reached the station's perimeter. State your business. Sergeant Marcus Chen, U.S. Army. We have civilian survivors, including children. We need shelter. A long pause. Then the front door opened. A woman emerged, mid-30s, wearing ranger gear, carrying a shotgun with practiced confidence. I'm Ranger Sarah Walsh. This is my station. She studied Marcus's group, her expression unreadable. How many? 43 total, mostly kids. Something shifted in Walsh's expression. Kids? She lowered her weapon slightly. Bring 'em up. But your people stay armed and visible. We've had bad experiences with strangers. The ranger station had become a fortress. Walsh and her 5 companions, 3 other rangers and 2 local hunters, had been holding the position for a week. They had reinforced the windows, established firing positions, and created an early warning system using motion sensors placed throughout the surrounding forest. We can make room, Walsh said after meeting with the children, but resources are limited. Food for maybe 2 weeks if we're careful. Marcus nodded. We'll pull our weight. My people are trained, and some of the civilians have useful skills. That night, around a carefully shielded campfire, Marcus learned about the station's previous occupants. A group of 20 refugees had arrived 4 days earlier, claiming to be survivors from a church group. It seemed legit, until they tried to take the station by force, believing the rangers were hoarding supplies. We held them off, Walsh said quietly, but barely. Lost 2 good people. That's when we decided, no more strangers. But you let us in. Walsh looked toward the building where 43 people were settling in for the night. Kids changed the equation. Besides, you've got the look. What look? The look of someone who's decided to make a stand. For 2 weeks, their makeshift community worked. The children attended improvised classes taught by the teachers. The adults organized patrols, maintained equipment, and planned for long-term survival. Marcus found himself becoming not just a military leader, but a community organizer, mediating disputes and making impossible decisions about resource allocation. But the infected found them eventually. They always did. The motion sensors triggered at 0400 on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was instantly awake, his trained instincts recognizing the pattern. Not 1 or 2 infected, but a massive horde moving through the forest with purpose. Through the ranger station surveillance systems, they watched a sea of bodies emerge from the tree line. Hundreds of infected, drawn by some signal Marcus couldn't identify. They moved with more coordinated than he'd ever seen, spreading out to surround the station. "How do they find us?" Davies asked, checking his rifle. Walsh answered grimly. "Doesn't matter now. We've got maybe an hour before they reach the perimeter." Marcus assembled his people, military and civilian alike. In 2 weeks, Bill Harrison had become a decent shot. Mrs. Patterson could reload magazines faster than some soldiers. Even the older children had learned to spot infected movement patterns. But math was math. They had perhaps 20 effective fighters against hundreds of infected. "We have 2 choices," Marcus told the assembled group. "We can try to break out, make a run for vehicles, and hope some of us escape. Or, we can make our stand here." "What are the odds we've run?" Bill asked. Marcus was honest. "Maybe 10% of us make it. The children? Probably none." The silence stretched long. Finally, Mrs. Patterson spoke up. "These kids have been through enough. They deserve better than dying afraid in the woods." One by one, the others nodded agreement. Even the children understood. This was where they made their stand. The battle began at dawn. The infected came in waves, testing different approaches, probing for weaknesses. Marcus coordinated the defense from the station's radio room, directing fire and managing ammunition supplies that dwindled with each passing hour. The first breach came at the east wall, where repeated impacts had weakened the reinforced windows. Davies died holding that position, buying time for Walsh to seal the breach with furniture and desperate gunfire. By noon, they'd fallen back to the station's central building, infected pouring through the outer defenses, forcing Marcus to make increasingly desperate decisions. Rodriguez volunteered for a suicide mission to destroy a cluster of infected with improvised explosives. Kim held the stairwell until his ammunition ran out, then continued fighting with a fire axe until the infected overwhelmed him. As the sun began to set, Marcus found himself in the station's radio room with the last survivors: Walsh, Bill, Mrs. Patterson, and 12 children. The infected filled the lower floors, clawing at the barricaded door that was their final defense. "How long?" Mrs. Patterson asked quietly, comforting a terrified 8-year-old. Marcus checked his remaining ammo. 3 magazines. Maybe an hour. But the radio crackled to life, interrupting his grim calculations. A voice tinged with static, but unmistakably official. Any stations! This is Colonel Morrison, U.S. Army Northern Command. We are establishing evacuation zones. If you can hear this transmission, rally to these coordinates." Marcus grabbed the microphone. "Colonel, this is Sergeant Chen. We have civilian survivors, including children, at the Millbrook Ranger Station. We are under heavy attack and require immediate extraction." The response came quickly. "Sergeant Chen, we have helicopters inbound to your location. ETA, 15 minutes. Can you hold?" Marcus looked at the door, which was beginning to splinter under the infected assault. He looked at the children huddled behind inadequate cover. He looked at the people who trusted him to save them. "Roger, Colonel. We'll hold." The final 15 minutes lasted forever. The door failed, and infected poured into their last refuge. Marcus and Walsh held the stairwell while Bill and Mrs. Patterson shepherded the children to the roof. Every bullet had to count. Every second fought for desperately. Marcus heard the helicopters before he saw them. The beautiful sound of rotors cutting through air. Military voices in the radio, professional and competent, coordinated a combat extraction. "Smoke popped. LZ is hot. Repeat, LZ is hot." The roof access was blocked by infected, forcing them to make their final stand in the radio room. Marcus had 1 magazine left when the first child was lifted to safety. 2 rounds remaining when Mrs. Patterson was pulled aboard the second helicopter. He was down to his sidearm when strong hands grabbed him, hauling him toward the helicopter's door. Below, the ranger station was completely overrun, infected swarming like ants on a dropped sandwich. But they'd held. They were alive because a sergeant had decided that some things were worth dying for. The evacuation zone was a fortified city built from the remnants of human civilization. Military discipline married to civilian ingenuity, creating something new from the ashes of the old world. Marcus learned that similar enclaves existed across the country, connected by radio and hope. slowly reclaiming territory from the infected. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the cemetery of New Haven, the name they'd given their community. Graves marked with simple wooden crosses, bearing the names of Davies, Rodriguez, Kim, and all the others who'd made their survival possible. Mrs. Patterson approached, leading a group of children who'd grown taller and stronger in their new home. "Tell us about Sergeant Davies again," 8-year-old Tommy requested. "The one who held the east wall." Marcus smiled, remembering his friend's terrible jokes and unwavering courage. Davies was a soldier who understood that some battles are worth fighting, even when you can't win. Especially when you can't win. As the sun set over New Haven's walls that protected 3,000 survivors and growing, Marcus understood that they hadn't just survived the zombie apocalypse. They discovered something humanity had almost lost. That civilization wasn't about building or technology or governments. It was about choosing to protect each other, even when the world ended. It was about making a stand. The end. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I'll be honest, I'm kind of a sucker nowadays for happy endings. I'm not sure when it changed from enjoying sad endings to enjoying happy endings, but if you can't tell lately, almost every one of my stories has had a happy ending. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.